Lucario. Not since Pikachu was there a Pokemon so evidently designed to be a fan favorite. Lucario got its own movie, a special way to get it in the games, trainers dressed like it, and it has its own special mystery aura power. Hell, they even got Goku to do the voice acting for it. Depending on who you talk to, Lucario is either one of the coolest Pokemon ever created, or its ubiquitous popularity is the most annoying thing in the world. But Game Freak set out to make a cool and popular Pokemon. You think they're gonna let that thing be bad? Let's find out. How good was Lucario actually? And in this video, we'll be covering these competitive formats. Look, Lucario replacing Mewtwo in Smash is a little telling. We've got another powerful sweeper on both ends of the spectrum whose defenses are its weakest points. But of course, Mewtwo still has amazing defenses and 130 speed, so it's not like Lucario is going to Ubers. In practice, Lucario's greatest assets are actually pretty unique. That fighting steel typing plus the combo of Swords Dance and Extreme Speed made for a Pokemon that could come in on a huge amount of popular attacks. Dragon, Dark, Ice, and Rock specifically. And proceed to end your entire team with a +2 attack, 120 priority move. Honestly, Lucario's speed isn't that incredible, but Extreme Speed made up for that, because it was just fast enough that most things that outsped it would be frail enough to fall to its priority, and anything slower would likely be utterly destroyed by close combat. Of course, that's two different moves that can't hit ghost types, so Lucario's last move was often dedicated to Crunch to handle those pesky phantoms like Rotom. However, Lucario would then have to rely on Extreme Speed for flying types, and that wasn't great either. Lucario was really a quintessential victim of the 4 move slot syndrome, with enough moves to threaten pretty much anything after a boost. Of course, the upshot to a lot of 4 move slot syndrome Pokemon is that they can creatively mix and match sets to their desire. If you didn't like relying on a normal type move to sweep, you could rely on agility instead. Patch up Lucario's speed another way and pick up an extra slot for coverage. This set actually allowed Lucario to beat many of its common counters. More on that later. Although, since we're on the topic of counters, Lucario actually was able to utilize that very move to become an effective anti-lead that would go into the match with strong momentum. Because its ability Inner Focus prevents flinching and Lucario is immune to Sandstorm, the only way to break its sash without actually hitting it was either with Hail or with Stealth Rock. Thus, physical mons got countered, while other fast elites died to close combat and Lucario's Sonic imitation. The move Crunch covered Azoth, giving Lucario a good matchup against many leads, albeit without the benefit of getting any entry hazards up. Lucario also made use of every single choice item remarkably well, shifting it into subtly different roles. Choice Span allowed it to break down the enemy team with a bevy of strong moves and proper prediction, while Choice Scarf allowed it to clean up instead of punching holes, although you were giving up one of your strongest attributes in Extreme Speed. In fact, the choice set that was the most effective was arguably Choice Specs. Let's not forget that Lucario actually had higher special attack than attack, and Aura Sphere was made for it. Lucario managed to keep its priority on special sets with Vacuum Wave, and Shadow Ball provided ample coverage alongside Dragon Pulse or Hidden Power Rock. Lucario's most common counters were those that managed to outspeed it and take minimal damage from Swords Dance. Although considering Swords Dance and Lucario's 110 attack, such mons were few and far between. Gliscor did well against any physical variant without Ice Punch, especially considering its remarkably good speed, and Hippowdon usually didn't even need to outspeed to win because of its bulk and recovery. The Swords Dance set lost to either flying or ghost types, depending on its choice of move, and the bulky water types could do well regardless. Maybe the best threat though was Gengar, who was immune to Extreme Speed and outsped Lucario. Only Bullet Punch variants would manage to beat it. These Pokemon also did well against the choice physical sets because of their resistances, although the prediction game was of course a bit scarier. But many of these counters fell to agility Lucario, who often didn't need the additional power to take out checks like Gengar, Gliscor, or Rotom, provided it had the right coverage move, which given the additional move slot it would. The weaker power overall meant entry hazards were required, but not having to rely on Extreme Speed could be a big boon. Meanwhile, Special Lucario's biggest threat was of course Blissey. Spiritomb, one of Lucario's teammates on Cynthia's champion team, did very well too, and Zapdos almost completely walled Lucario. The one common counter was Gyarados, whose high special defense let it beat this Lucario, while it could set up on a variety of physical sets. Other than that, other priority, Choice Scarf mons like Heatran and Burn were all effective ways to deal with it, at least the physical versions. Lucario's variants made it one of those other Pokemon where finding out the set was essential to beating it. You know, it seems like we've had a lot of those recently. Honestly, Lucario sort of seems designed to take advantage of everything Gen 4 brought. It's a mixed attacker which uses special fighting moves and has a signature move that's pretty emblematic of the generation. Its move pool was big enough that it even had options we didn't talk about, like Calm Mind or an actual mix set, though the drop in power wasn't really worth it. It's not a surprise surprised that one of the mascots of the generation was one of the hallmarks of the competitive scene. A gigantic question mark in your opponent's team that easily established itself as one of the biggest threats of the generation. There were two big changes to Lucario in Gen 5. The first was the addition of Justified. A useful ability considering Lucario's 4x Dark Resist was all the more important since Team Preview meant dedicated lead Lucario was mostly dead. The other was a buff to Extreme Speed to make it +2 priority, which allowed Lucario to match up well against other priority users that previously beat it like Infernape, as well as the new threats of Technician Breloom and Thunderous Therian. Lucario's old Swords Dance cleaner set was still one of the strongest late game cleaners in the game, with a nearly identical build. The only difference was the prevalence of Ice Punch to deal with the incredibly common Landorus Therian. But Black and White also brought Jellicent, a new, even more annoying ghost type, which made Lucario facepalm if it didn't have Crunch. Lucario's signature set arguably got better in a vacuum because of the extreme speed buffs, but in the meta itself, it wasn't that great. The prevalence of bulky fighting types that could take hits and hit back, such as Conkeldurr and Terrakion, really hurt Lucario, and that 90 speed stat was starting to show. Even if it could catch Landorus T on the switch, it had 1 speed less, meaning a head-to-head wasn't likely to go super well unless. Gliscor, Hippowdon, and Gyarados continued to be especially effective threats based on specific sets, and the burden of prediction went down quite a bit. With the power creep, Lucario's wide range of sets has shrunk significantly. Choice Specs and Nasty Plot sets were still viable, but it was that low speed that let it down. Vacuum Wave was too weak to punch through the faster psychic types. Alakazam and Starmie could come in and invalidate Lucario's speed while exploiting its low defenses. Not to mention that Lucario was outclassed by Pokemon like Scizor and the Latios. Unfortunately, Lucario had just reached the breaking point of power where variety didn't matter anymore, so Swords Dance was his most common set by far. Other especially good and fun counters included Unaware Quagsire and Sableye, who could frequently find switch-ins and either ignore Lucario's boosts or burn it. Lucario may have been one of the big faces of Gen 4, but it was Gen 5 now, and there were new Pokemon out for blood. Lucario was still overused, but not the same terror it had been in Gen 4. Lucario's weakness to common spread moves and low defenses meant it wasn't a great VGC pick, but it did show up a little bit in 2013, in Australia, in Seniors. It was on both the 6th and 7th place teams, but we don't know much other than that. So, next. While Lucario languished out of the eye of Papa Game Freak for a bit, they made sure to give it some attention in XY. Mega Lucario took everything about Lucario and kicked it up. Higher attacking stats, higher speed, an incredible ability in adaptability, and even some extra defense. The Steel type changes were a mixed bag overall, but helped Lucario as an attacking Steel type a lot, especially since it wanted to spam Steel type moves. Mega Lucario quickly proved to be way too good for overuse, especially since its higher speed meant Nasty Plot sets were once again viable. Coming into Ubers, these options mostly died again, and that's because Lucario had a really specific niche in Ubers courtesy of its Steel typing, which was killing Xerneas. Lucario's bullet punches were incredibly strong against the reigning Fairy type, and provided a reliable check to one of the scariest Pokemon in the game. That was honestly Lucario's biggest pro, but it of course had crazy power anyways with Swords Dance, adaptability, and close combat. It just had a hard time finding room to set up, and even if it did, Lucario had to deal with Ho-Oh. Mega Lucario had 2 uses. Against offensive teams, it was to beat Xerneas, and against Stall, it was to use its massive power to hit hard and break them down. As said, Ho-Oh was the biggest counter by far, resisting both of Lucario's stats and able to hit back hard with a Sacred Fire. With Stealth Rock support, boosted Mega Lucario was capable of killing Ho-Oh, but otherwise it was in trouble. Other flying types like Lugia could also cause problems, as could Mega Gengar, who trapped and killed Mega Lucario with a Focus Blast. Mewtwo could outspeed and kill, Mega Salamence's Intimidate could cause problems, and past that, it was the classic counters, Ghost types, status, and revenge killers who didn't care about Bullet Punch. Mega Lucario wasn't one of the strongest Ubers, but it was certainly powerful, and way too powerful for overuse. And speaking of overuse, regular Lucario made occasional appearances in overuse, but it was actually underused for the generation, unable to take advantage of its biggest bit of personal power creep in those tiers. Lucario found itself outsped and outmatched in overuse, where it just ran its traditional Swords Dance Extreme Speed set. The lower power barrier in underuse actually let it run both its boosting sets, but I'm not sure how happy it was at being there in the first place. The one place where Lucario did manage to find some success in both forms was in VGC. Mega Lucario meant Lucario finally had a place in VGC, specifically as a strong counter to one of the best Pokemon in the format, Mega Kangaskhan. It struggled with another strong Pokemon in Aegislash, but as time went on, Lucario and its Mega brethren saw tons of success across the world, including, hold on here, 2nd at Asia Cup, 5th at Virginia Regionals, 9th and 14th in Long Beach, 6th in Massachusetts, 4th in Kansas, 5th and 12th in Brisbane, 2nd in Sydney, 6th in Perth, and 2nd in Melbourne. That's a lot of results to prove the Mon could do well, especially in Australia. Keep track of that. Let's go over some specific builds and placements. Regular Lucario actually found its niche as a follow-me user of all things. Inner focus meant Lucario could draw fake-outs and still manage to counterattack with a close combat or a bullet punch. The most successful example of this set was used by Simon Yip in an extremely memorable team at US Nationals, where he used it alongside another redirector, Amoonguss, to enable his Mega Blastoise. Lucario came in on a grass type that Amoonguss couldn't handle, like Mega Venusaur and other Amoongusses, and easily tanked their attacks, allowing Mega Blastoise to pop off with its crazy water spouts. Simon's biggest innovation was bringing Final Gambit as well, a gambit that allowed him to surgically remove common Blastoise counters like Venusaur by sacrificing his Lucario. This incredibly inventive team went all the way to 3rd place at Nationals. A different breed of regular Lucario was William Biolski Hall's Specs Lucario, which was designed to kill Mega Kangas on the first turn and got him to 11th in Utah. Biolski admits that this was gimmicky, but it was an effort to stop one of the most brutal mons in the game. This was the purpose of many of the Mega Lucarios as well, including Gavin Michaels' Mega Lucario he used to get 8th at US Nationals. In Gavin's own words, every team that doesn't use Kangaskhan needs one insanely hard answer to it. In his case, Mega Lucario's ability to outspeed and do massive damage with adaptability was just the case. It's also worth noting that Gavin actually had another Mega on his team, Venusaur. Lucario was one of the more common Pokemon to run on 2 Mega teams, as even if it couldn't one-hit KO without specs, its naturally good stats and priority meant it could function well anyways, and its plug-and-play nature against Kanga teams made it really easy to choose when to put it in. Other notable Mega Lucario appearances included Wolf's 5th place at Virginia very early in the season, which was actually a nasty plot sweeper, and Blake Hopper's physical set he used to place 5th in Missouri. Lucario's 2 best placements, however, were at Worlds. Remember Australia? Remember how Lucario's lone placement in 2013 was in Australia too? Well, 2014 marked the first time Australia made top 8 at Worlds, and the only time until Sam Pedalist last year. Dane O'Meara, who had also taken 2nd at Melbourne Regionals with Mega Lucario, took the same team to 8th place at Worlds. While Dane ran special Mega Lucario in Melbourne, he pivoted to a physical set for Worlds, based on the absurd punch of adaptability close combat. Dane was, as with anyone else, looking for a way to deal with Mega Kanga, and to a lesser extent Mega Charizard Y, even though he eventually dropped Rock Slide for substitute. But the best performance from Mega Lucario overall was Jody Azzarelli's 2nd place finish at Worlds. Jody also ran Mega Lucario on his team of 6 with another Mega in Charizard Y, and, like everyone else, it served the simple purpose of removing Kanga. Jody himself called it boring, but hey, 2nd at Worlds isn't that boring. All in all, there were 6 Lucarios at Worlds, 3 Mega and 3 regular, which I personally think is pretty damn cool. It's rare to find a Pokemon that actually had use in both ways, and what's more, could use that variety well. And 2015 marked the end of Mega Lucario's brief tenure as a premier Pokemon in VGC. Remember Chalk? About 4 of those 5 Pokemon, Cresselia, Heatran, Amoonguss, and Landorus, did super well against Lucario, and the Common Thundurus also walled it completely. Lucario still saw some good placings, like 3rd in Texas, 11th in Indiana, and 3rd at UK Regionals, both Mega and not, courtesy of Follow Me, but by the time Worlds rolled around, it had dropped off in popularity almost entirely. And Mega Lucario received a significant buff in Gen 7, in the form of the change to Mega Evolution. Now, when a Pokemon Mega evolved, it immediately used its new speed, rather than on the turn after. The ability to utilize its base 112 speed immediately was a huge boon to Mega Lucario, that saw it shoot up in usage in Ubers, at least in Sun and Moon. Its biggest issue was with Zygarde Complete, whose impenetrable bulk made it hard for even an adaptability and Swords Dance boosted close combat to get through. Toxapex was also an issue as long as Mega Lucario didn't run Earthquake, which was unlikely given how valuable each of its standard moves were. Ultra Sun and Moon gave Mega Lucario Meteor Mash by way of Smeargle, but they also introduced a big competitor in the form of Duskmane Necrozma, whose bulk leads to ease of setup and boasts the same status of Xerneas counter. The Ultra Game's biggest blow to Mega Lucario, however, was Marshadow, who will always beat Mega Lucario one-on-one and can steal boosts as well. With all things considered, Mega Lucario sits at about the same place it did last generation, a terrifying threat with proper setup, but one that can be neutralized due to its poor bulk, so it's still an Uber, undoubtedly an Uber. Meanwhile, normal Lucario only suffers more and more as time goes on, and currently sits in the rarely used ban list, with a consolation Meteor Mash as its only prize. Finally, VGC 2017 saw Mega Stones being banned, which severely limited Lucario's play. It only had 3 notable appearances to its name: a 28th place finish at Worlds from Marcus Statter, a 7th place finish at the Torino special event piloted by Stefano Manera, and most notably 1st at Fort Wayne Regionals on Alex Underhill's team. Alex used a Follow Me Final Gambit split Lucario to enable spread move spam from his Torkoal and Drampa, of all things. It's a really cool team and you should definitely check it out. And that's it, so how good was Lucario actually? Again, this one's a puzzler. Lucario's entrance onto the scene was as an unpredictable mixed threat who took full advantage of Gen 4's physical special split, and it was one of the best offensive threats in the game. But as time has gone by, its low power made it less and less able to put its incredible move pool to use. And then came Mega Lucario, which is fantastic. So fantastic in fact that it was banned at Ubers, and was fantastic enough to make a number of appearances in VGC, at least for 2014. So overall, definitely a really strong Pokemon, but one which you might not see a lot these days. Thanks for watching everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False White Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and as always, as I always say, comment on what Pokemon you want to see next. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms, yada yada yada. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.